Lord Peter Death Braden Wimsey, tall, fair, monocled, and inconveniently cheerful, stepped out of the grey Bentley 12 and into an air that might have been distilled from damp stone and thwarted expectations. Farleigh Crescent, a fashionable semicircle of late Regency townhouses perched above the mist-swaddled estuary of the Essex Stour, had been designed to suggest classical comfort. On this bleak Maundy Thursday, it succeeded only in looking faintly ashamed of itself. Superintendent Treadgold of the local constabulary awaited him at the gate of number 7, frowning at his watch in the defensive manner of a man betrayed by railway timetables. Wimsey removed his trilby, revealing hair the colour of an underripe barley field, and waggled a gloved forefinger. "Punctuality, my dear Treadgold," he observed, "is the courtesy of kings and the tyranny of minor civil servants." Treadgold, who had prepared a greeting that contained neither courtesy nor tyranny, contented himself with a growl. "Thank you for coming down, my lord. Inspector Sugden's inside with the body." "Body?" Wimsey echoed, as though surprised to find one at the centre of a murder investigation. "Oh, quite. Perfectly splendid." "Lead on." They entered the tall, lemon-painted doorway and proceeded along a narrow passage lined with sepia engravings of Italian ruins. A faint odour of lilacs wavered in the chill hall. Too sweet, too insistent, like an overwrought debutante at her first ball. Wimsey sniffed, paused, and glanced at the black and white tiles beneath his feet. "Most engaging," he murmured. "You know, Lucian said that the dead leave no footprints, but Lucian was speaking metaphorically, and in any case the Latin text has vestigia, not vestigium, as people persist in quoting. Quite the difference." Treadgold's moustache bristled in a way that suggested the superintendent did not find classical philology germane to the matter. "If you please, my lord." The drawing-room proved large, chilly, and over-curated. Velvet curtains a shade too purple, Waterford crystal a trifle too ostentatious, a Gainsborough, possibly, hung so obtrusively as to proclaim its owner's anxiety for provenance. In the centre, upon an Aubusson rug, the colour of faded roses, lay Sir Osmond Venn, retired tea merchant, amateur phrenologist, and newly created baronet, now rather more retired than society customarily demands. A brass paper knife protruded from the pale silk waistcoat, its ornate handle shaped like a coiling serpent biting its own tail. Inspector Sugden, younger and keener than Treadgold, but already grey about the temples from association with his superior, straightened as Wimsey crossed to the corpse. "Stabbed clean through," Sugden reported. "No sign of forced entry. Nasty business, sir. Wife found him just after 8 this morning when he did not come down for breakfast." Wimsey knelt, careful not to disturb the rug's scrolling pattern. "Breakfast is so easily delayed by death," he said lightly. "What time did Lady Venn ring up the police?" 8:15. "And the doctor?" Dr. Halloran was called at 8:20, arrived at 8:30, pronounced life extinct about that time. "He puts death between midnight and 2. Wimsey's long fingers, encased in grey suede, hovered a hairbreadth above the silver serpent. He did not touch, merely observed. On the adjacent mahogany escritoire stood a half-empty decanter of Malmsey and a cut-glass goblet. Beside it, oddly domestic, rested a tin of Great Eastern patent lilac boot polish, its lid askew, the pungent scent aligning with the odour lingering in the hall. Boot polish in a drawing-room was, Wimsey reflected, a detail not quite among friends. He eyed a pair of Turkish slippers beneath a nearby chaise longue. Pale yellow kid, soles immaculate. Sugden followed his gaze. "We noticed them too, my lord, but Lady Venn says Sir Osmond took to pottering about in those after dinner. With all due respect, I don't see—" "One rarely does," Wimsey agreed amiably. "Forgive me, Inspector. I collect irrelevancies the way magpies collect spoons." He rose, brushed an imaginary speck from his knee, and turned to Treadgold. Tell me, Super, who else is housed in this estimable crescent of yours? Treadgold consulted a notebook. Number 5. Colonel the Honourable Addison Markham, retired Indian Army. Number 6. Vacant, the owner abroad. Number 8. Miss Enid Pomfret, an elderly lady of means. Number 9. Mr. Adrian Frayne, stage designer. Number 10. Reverend Giles Dacres, vicar of St. Indrith's. All neighbours claim to have heard nothing. Only Miss Pomfret's maid says she heard the service bell ring at 1:30 a.m., but she assumed Sir Osmond had rung for his valet. A bell at 1:30, Wimsey repeated. And the valet? Martins, said Sugden. Found fast asleep in his attic room. Claims he was not rung. The bell-pull wire runs through the wall behind that escritoire. Wimsey gave the wire one of his gentle, lopsided smiles, as though greeting an old acquaintance. A bell that rings but is ignored. Very Polonius of it. His gaze drifted to a tall case clock ticking sedately in the corner, its brass pendulum lazily keeping time with the hush of the house. He observed it for 6 silent beats. Treadgold, he said suddenly, has anybody wound that clock this week? The superintendent looked baffled. Martins does so daily, I'm told. Does he now? And did the doctor remark upon rigour? He did, though nothing unusual. Why? Only that a clock can be a far greater liar than a politician, and your politician must occasionally face an electorate. Let us interview Lady Venn, if she feels up to it. He paused at the threshold, monocle glittering. Oh, and could somebody please remove that tin of boot polish before it stains the Aubusson? It would be a pity to ruin so lovely a floor covering. Sugden coughed. The rug's already ruined, sir, by the blood. Wimsey's expression turned almost melancholy. Ah, but blood, Sugden, can be expiated. Lilac boot polish lingers. With that enigmatic pronouncement, Lord Peter Wimsey strolled into the hallway, humming a fragment of Il Trovatore, and apparently as light-hearted as a man about to select a silk cravat. Only the acute listener could have noticed that his tune was fractionally off-key, by exactly 1 semitone. Lady Venn awaited them in the morning-room, a chamber all pale pistachio panelling and anxious chintz, as though the decorator had tried to upholster a conscience. She was a slim woman approaching 50, strawberry-blonde hair arranged in precise waves that gave no quarter to grief. Only the rigid clasp of her gloved hands betrayed strain. Her voice, when she spoke, adhered to the cool etiquette of an acquaintance passing the salt. I appreciate your coming, Lord Peter. The superintendent says you have experience in these ghastly matters. Wimsey bowed, light as a madrigal. I collect experiences, Lady Venn. Some prove useful, others only enlarge the dust of memory. I'm sorry for your loss. She accepted the conventional phrase with a fractional tilt of the head, then resumed surveying a distant lilac bush beyond the French windows, as though the shrub might bloom explanations. Wimsey sat, uninvited, yet somehow inevitable, on an armless side chair disguised as an antique. Treadgold and Sugden stood, pockets bristling with notebooks. "Will you tell me," Wimsey began, "what last evening looked like from behind your own eyes?" The phrasing disarmed her. She glanced at him, half startled, and then spoke with the deliberate clarity of one accustomed to charitable committees and minutes of meetings. Osmond dined at 7 precisely. Roast duckling, apple sauce, a bottle of Chateau Léoville. He was in good spirits, almost jovial. Afterward, he insisted on going to his study, to revise, he said, the final chapter of the memoirs no one will read. That was at 8:30. Did anyone else join him? No. Colonel Markham called earlier, in the afternoon, for one of their interminable arguments about phrenology. But the colonel left before tea. At 10:30, I wished my husband good night. He was polishing his Turkish slippers and teasing Martins for mixing up the tins. He hated the lilac polish. He said it was frivolous as a voting reform. His words. Indeed, very apt. Wimsey pinched his lip. Did he say why Martins had supplied it? Because the proper neutral polish had run out and the shops were closed. And after 10:30? I went to bed. I took 2 veronal tablets at 11, a wretched habit, but sleep has eluded me since Christmas. I heard nothing until the maid brought my tea at 7:30. You did not wake when the service bell rang at 1:30? Her eyes widened. The bell rang? My room is 2 floors up. I slept quite soundly. Thank you. Whimsy rose. One last trifle. Does Sir Osmond's pocket watch keep good time? Abominable time. It loses 5 minutes a day. He preferred the long case clock, which Martins winds daily. So I'm told. She hesitated. Does any of this help? One never knows at the time, Whimsy replied with gentle vagueness. But everything helps eventually. Truth is a mosaic. Each piece is ugly in isolation. He left her to the consolations of well-intentioned silence and beckoned Sugden toward the back stairs. The servants' quarters smelled of coal dust and furniture polish, the sober perfume of houses that run by habit. Martins, a thin man of indeterminate middle age with a complexion reminiscent of parchment soaked in tea, awaited them in his cramped bedroom among meticulously folded shirts. Sorry for the disorder, my lord, he said, gesturing at a spotless dresser. Perish the thought. Whimsy smiled. Tell me about this lilac boot polish escapade. A lapse in judgment, eh? Martins colored. Entirely my own mistake, sir. The neutral tin was finished. Sir Osmond wanted the slippers ready for the morning. I found the lilac polish among unused supplies, thought the color would scarcely show. It looked near white under lamplight. And Sir Osmond objected? Not at first. He joked, said he hoped the Colonel's military nerves could endure pastel footwear. Then he told me to leave him. At what hour? Around 10:30, sir. I was dismissed for the night. Yet someone rang your bell at 1:30. Martins shook his head. I heard nothing, my lord. I sleep like the proverbial top. Curious tops they breed in Essex. Whimsy tapped his chin. You wind the hall clock? Every evening at 9 sharp, sir, before I go off duty. And last night? I wound it as usual. Whimsy produced a thin notebook from his sleeve like a magician palming cards. A puff of arithmetic, Martins. If the clock loses or gains time, you would notice. Martins looked stricken. The clock is as steady as the mail train, sir. I never observed a discrepancy. Splendid. Now, did Sir Osmond often write in the evenings? Every night these past fortnight. His memoirs, milestones in the tea trade, he said. Boring even to himself, if I may be excused. You may. One final point. Who in the household knew about the bell-pull's location behind the escritoire? Any footman serving at table would see it. Currently, that is young Alfred, and myself on occasion. Thank you. Whimsy slid the notebook away. I commend your iron shirts. The crease of empire survives in you. Leaving the valet, Whimsy strode down a narrow corridor, paused by a small window, and opened it. Cool air flowed in. The estuary fog had thinned to reveal gleaming mud flats. He sniffed, salt and tide and something faintly metallic, then shut the sash. Treadgold grumbled, Are we any farther on? 1 3/4 miles, Whimsy said cheerfully. Shall we call upon Miss Pomfret? She claims to have heard the bell. One should congratulate an elderly ear. They crossed the crescent slate clouds rolling overhead like immoderate critics. Miss Pomfret's housekeeper admitted them into a parlor stuffed with china spaniels and the faint odor of dried lavender. Miss Pomfret herself resembled a piece of parchment, animated by brisk indignation and woolen shawls. I told your constable, she began, that the bell rang at 1:30, or near enough. So shrill it woke me. Sir Osmond was forever rattling those bells. Indeed, madam, Whimsy said, bowing so low his monocle nearly fell. Did you hear anything else? A motor car, perhaps, or a door? I heard a carriage clock strike 2 in Mr. Frayn's house. He keeps a delicate instrument, then silence. No traffic at that hour. Thank you. Your sense of time is admirable. One remembers wartime air raid schedules, she said tartly. Habit of listening. Outside, Treadgold muttered, another contradiction. Martin says the clock keeps perfect time. Lady Venn calls it unreliable. Perception, Whimsy murmured, often ticks faster than brass. They reached number 9. Mr. Adrian Phryne's facade sported freshly painted shutters in a hue better suited to theatre flats than Georgian stucco. The occupant opened the door himself. A slim man in a smoking jacket patterned with moons and lyres, looking as though he had slipped from a Goya etching via a set designer's toolbox. "Detectives, do step in." His voice had agreeable Conan Doyle-ish sibilance. "I gather Sir Osmond has at last performed something truly memorable." "In a manner of speaking," Whimsy said. "You were acquainted?" "I dined with him weekly. He adored theatrical gossip, and I enjoyed his earnest credulity. We drank chartreuse, argued allegory, parted friends. Dreadful bore, really. Last night, I was at my drafting table until 3, sketching a set for the Duchess of Malfi. Shadowy archways, blood, betrayal, all that. I heard Sir Osmond's service bell, silly contraption, around 1:30. I noted it in my sketchbook as a cue for a sound effect. Here. He produced the book. In one margin, a penciled scrawl read 1:32, chime next door, like a strangled linnet. "A poetic simile," Whimsy remarked. "May I ask, does your carriage clock keep Greenwich time?" "Obsessively. It is electric." "Then your note is reliable." Phryne arched a brow. "I never miss time drama, my lord. Audiences revolt." Treadgold studied Whimsy's face. So the bell rang. "Why summon a valet who never came? And why did no one hear a struggle?" "Because," Whimsy replied absently, "if you intend to stage a murder that looks like interrupted routine, you first arrange the bell as curtain raiser, and you invite no audience." The superintendent stared. "Meaning?" "Meaning I should like to see Colonel Markham next." Whimsy turned toward number 5. "But first, Sugden, pop back and examine the long case clock. Note its hands." Sugden hurried off. Treadgold frowned after him. "You think time's the key?" "Time, Super, is always the key, our jailer, warden, and eventual liberator." He glanced along the Crescent sweep. Sir Osmond obsessed over chronology, train departures, tea auction openings, shipping invoices. A man watches clocks all his life, then dies while his own clock contradicts him. I find the irony irresistible. Colonel Markham greeted them in a study dominated by tiger skins and brass shell cases, converted to umbrella stands. His handshake was stiff, his gaze openly appraising. He offered whiskey at noon. Whimsy accepted a thimbleful. "You saw Sir Osmond yesterday," Whimsy began. "Indeed. He wished my opinion on some bump he fancied indicated innate malignity. Phrenology. Poppycock, but the old boy loved it." "Did you quarrel?" "A lively debate. I left at 6. Good heavens, you surely don't suspect." "We suspect logic, Colonel. Did Sir Osmond complain of faulty footwear?" "Footwear. Only remarked his valet had ruined the slippers with feminine nonsense." We laughed. Whimsy drained his glass. "Colonel, your front window overlooks the Crescent. Did you observe lights at number 7 later?" "I read until midnight. Saw nothing, barring that infernal hall lamp he keeps blazing." "Thank you." Whimsy rose. "Your service revolver in the display, 12-bore Webley." The colonel puffed. "Deactivated. Sentiment only." "Sentiment, Colonel, sometimes fires louder than cordite. Good day." They met Sugden outside, breathless. "The hall clock, my lord. It reads 10 minutes slow, though wound." "Excellent," Whimsy said softly. He faced the chilly breeze off the estuary, eyes narrowing as though studying invisible tide tables. Come, gentlemen, let us examine Sir Osmond's manuscript. Murder, like biography, is often revised at the 11th hour, and by an unsteady hand. Treadgold grumbled. And the boot polish? That super, Whimsy replied, is our author's telltale fingerprint, visible only under the lilac light of his vanity. We must follow its scent to the end of the paragraph, which I trust will not exceed 12,000 words. He stepped away, humming once more, and this time the tune resolved into perfect pitch, an almost imperceptible click, like a lock engaging behind a door not yet opened. Sugden fetched the keys, and the three men returned to the late baronet's study, whose shutters not even the paling noon could fully brighten. Whimsy unlocked the escritoire, in which the valet swore the memoirs lay. Inside, neat bundles of foolscap sat ribbon-tied in chronological order, each headed Rambling Recollections of a Merchant Adventurer. Whimsy took the final bundle to the window and riffled pages with the delicacy of a harpist striking harmonics. The ink on the last sheet shone blue-black and faintly tacky. He touched it with a fingernail and nodded. Written after 10:30, certainly. Dr. Halloran fixes death no earlier than midnight, so our author survived the valet's dismissal by at least 90 minutes. Martin's alibi grows sturdier. Treadgold peered at the heading. Chapter 27. A disquisition on time rates in the Foochow Tea Exchange. He snorted. He died of boredom, if nothing else. Doubtful, Whimsy murmured. Observe the marginalia. Beside several paragraphs lay small penciled crosses, each annotated query mark CF. Frame for stage version or seek kernel on cranial bump chronology. He compared the handwriting to earlier chapters. The crosses were new. Our victim mined his acquaintances for color, hardly the act of a hermit. He required their recollections. He lifted a blotter. Beneath lay a crumpled carbon sheet bearing a single sentence typed on a portable machine. One must alter the clock, or the clock will alter one. No signature, merely a faint smear of lilac across the edge, as though the page had been dragged against a freshly polished slipper. Whimsy folded it carefully. The escritoire yielded no further curiosities save a hollow behind the bottom drawer, where a slim Morocco notebook rattled when shaken. In it, Whimsy found columns of numbers beside station names. Liverpool Street, 2205, Manningtree, 2311, Mistley, 2325. Rail times, he said, tapping the page. Northbound and southbound alike. Sir Osmond evidently entertained the idea of nocturnal travel. Treadgold's eyes narrowed. Could he have intended to leave, to catch one of those trains, and been surprised? Perhaps. Whimsy slid the notebook into his breast pocket. But we have a corpse wearing Turkish slippers, not walking boots. He glanced at the fire grate. Yesterday's ashes lay undisturbed, save for a faint dusting of purple where a scrap had burned incompletely. He used sugar tongs to extract the cinder. A curled fragment of photograph paper, its emulsion bubbled. The only visible feature was a woman's bare shoulder and a sliver of a serpent-shaped paper knife, identical to the murder weapon. A private print, he said softly. Someone feared the negative might speak. He dropped the fragile piece into an envelope. Sugden, crouched by a side table, discovered a draftsman's roll of translucent tracing paper. Upon it, Phryne's confident hand had sketched the drawing-room in plan. Furniture positions, bell-pull wire, even the long-case clock. A second overlay marked routes in red. Captain of stage directions. Actor enters from hall. Cue bell. Curtain. Sugden whistled. That looks like rehearsal notes, sir. Whimsy smiled without mirth. More like scenery plotting for an unsuspecting actor, Sir Osmond himself. He straightened, dusting crepe from his knees, and crossed to the hall clock. A small brass catch allowed the face to swing open. He sniffed the interior, fresh machine oil overlaying the older, dusty scent. Extracting a silk handkerchief, he dabbed the palette, withdrew, and displayed a streak of lilac. Someone oiled the works last night, using Martin's rag perhaps, already contaminated from the slippers. That slowed the escapement. 10 minutes' loss establishes a convenient confusion. Treadgold exhaled. So the bell rang at 1:30 by the clock, but really nearer 1:20? Precisely, and Sir Osmond may have thought it earlier still if he relied on his slow pocket watch. Imagine, he pulls the bell, expecting Martin's. No one comes. The killer, ahead of him by unrevealed minutes, steps from concealment, applies the knife, departs at a leisure. Police later fix time of death by the lying timepieces. But why ring? Sugden demanded. He would summon the valet only if something distressed him. Perhaps he smelt oil, or heard tampering, or glimpsed a trespasser. Wimsey looked to the escritoire, the burnt photograph, the typed epigram. Our murderer rehearsed a scene about time. The victim became critic rather than actor and was cut short. A thin cry drifted from the landing. Lady Venn, pale and tremulous, hurried down clutching a telegram. "Forgive me," she faltered. "This arrived just now, from Dorset." She handed it to Treadgold but kept her gaze on Wimsey. "It concerns my cousin, Dr. Vernon Hyde. He was to arrive last night, but writes he missed the late train at Manningtree. He apologizes for not calling." Wimsey's brows lifted. "Missed the 23:11, I suppose." He retrieved the Rail Times notebook and displayed the identical entry. Fascinating coincidence. Lady Venn read the page, face drawn. Osmond jotted those times only yesterday afternoon. He spoke of meeting Vernon for scientific consultation. She shuddered. "Has that any bearing?" "All bearings are worth charting," Wimsey assured her. "Pray rest, Lady Venn. The superintendent and I shall unravel this knot." When she had gone, Treadgold muttered, "Dr. Cousin, another suspect." "Another pawn," Wimsey corrected, "but the board is set for a gambit." He gestured to Sugden. "Take that tracing paper to Frayne, ask when he drafted it, then invite him to tea here at 4. Colonel Markham likewise. I shall telephone Bunter to bring photographic kit and a stopwatch." He smiled faintly at Treadgold's mystification. "We stage our own rehearsal when the fog returns at dusk." By 3:30 the tide had turned and river mist seeped back into Farleigh Crescent like an embarrassed secret. For once, even Treadgold admitted the gloom proved useful. The guests would not note precise angles of lamplight that interested Wimsey. Bunter, immaculate in travelling tweeds, had set tripod and plates inside the drawing room, confessing only that his employer desired a few interior studies for architectural record. At 4, precisely, by Wimsey's pocket chronograph, not the hall clock, Frayne arrived, coat flapping like a stage curtain, followed minutes later by Colonel Markham in starched collar and scent of bay rum. Lady Venn descended, her composure restored to the exact degree demanded by tea with neighbours. Martins served. Conversation meandered through polite alleys until Wimsey interrupted a reminiscence of Delhi polo grounds with, "Colonel, have you ever fenced with stage weapons?" Markham blinked. "Once advised a repertory company, sabre drill mostly." "Why?" Wimsey rose, fetched the serpent-hilted paper knife, its blade discreetly dulled by Sugden, and placed it on a side table. "Because last night an amateur choreographer staged conflict here. I wish to time a hypothetical entrance." He signaled Bunter, whose fingers poised on the stopwatch. Miss Pomfret heard the bell at what she believed 1:30. "Mr. Frayne, you noted it 2 minutes later. The hall clock now shows 4:30. In fact, it is 4:40. I propose to replicate conditions." He drew the curtains, plunging the room into milky twilight, then took position by the escritoire. "Ladies and gentlemen, indulge me. At my signal, Inspector Sugden will pull the bell from the hall as Sir Osmond did. Colonel, you will stand where you conversed with Sir Osmond yesterday, by the mantel. Mr. Frayne, Kindly take the armchair as one examining sketch plans. Martins will wait on the landing as usual. No one refused. The oddness of the request transfixed them. Whimsy nodded. Sugden jerked the bell pull. Distant clanging echoed upstairs. Bunter clicked the watch. They waited. 30 seconds elapsed before Martins entered, bowing. "You took the direct stair?" Whimsy asked. "Yes, my lord." "Thank you. You may withdraw." Bunter marked the time. 35 seconds. Whimsy turned to Frayne. "Last night the valet did not arrive. Yet you, Mr. Frayne, heard the bell clearly through your wall. How long after the bell did you draw that marginal note?" "Immediately," Frayne answered, uneasy. "I jotted the thought, lest I forget." "Then you marked the time. 1:32, by your electric clock, which gains or loses no more than a second a month." Whimsy's voice grew quiet. "But the hall clock was already slow. You or someone had hampered it with oil an hour earlier, ensuring confusion. Only a person with theatrical concern for cues would fuss over such mechanical dramatic irony." Frayne laughed, too light. "Surely anyone could. Not anyone owned tracing overlays of this room or coached Sir Osmond to sit precisely where the bell's wire ran. Not anyone planned a tableau in which the victim's blood would soak a rug arranged for maximum visual symmetry. You did." Absurd. Why should I?" "Because," said Whimsy, "Sir Osmond threatened to expose you. That burnt photograph showed you in compromising liaison with a lady not your own. He meant to include it in his memoirs, spice for the readers, perhaps blackmail for himself. You stole the print from his dark room yesterday, but feared the negative existed. You returned last night with a duplicate key obtained while dining weekly. You slowed the clock, staged the bell to lure him into standing, and stabbed him as he turned, thus sparing yourself a duel with scandal." Frayne's face drained of color. His hands fluttered like broken marionettes. "Ridiculous. Where is your proof?" "In your flat," Whimsy said gently, "lies a pot of Great Eastern lilac polish missing a spoonful, borrowed to smear the slippers so Martins would fetch the wrong tin next day. I expect also to find your stub train ticket for the 23:25 back from Manningtree. You met Hyde on the platform, contrived to delay him with convivial drinks, ensuring the cousin never reached Farleigh Crescent before dawn. An alibi by misdirection, the oldest trick in repertory." Sugden laid a hand on the designer's shoulder. Frayne sagged. "He was going to ruin me," he whispered. "I gave him everything, sets, introductions. Yet he laughed, said scandal would boost sales. I wanted only to frighten him, swear I did, then the knife." Cole Markham emitted a low growl. Lady Venn covered her eyes, but tears slipped between fingers nonetheless. Whimsy sighed, motioned Sugden to escort the prisoner. Treadgold, subdued, followed. When the door closed, Lady Venn murmured, "Lord Peter, must the world know?" Whimsy offered her the briefest incline of the head. The press need not savor every detail. A private tragedy can remain footnote to public justice. She managed a wan smile. He bowed and stepped into the foggy hall where Bunter waited with coat and hat. Outside, lamps were winking into twilight, their amber circles distorted by vapor. Whimsy drew a deep breath of river mist, as though to cleanse a palate soured by lilac and blood, and murmured to his man, "Time, Bunter, always strikes the final cue. We are merely poor players, hoping to keep in step." Bunter inclined his head with that inimitable neutrality. "The Bentley, my lord, keeps perfect time." "Better than most hearts," Whimsy replied. And together they vanished into the descending haze, the slow beat of the hall clock marking, belatedly, 4:50. Whimsy said little. On the drive back to the Bell and Dragon, the old coaching inn where he and Bunter had taken rooms. The Bentley's lamps pushed twin tunnels through the mist, and the hush of tires on wet macadam laid a discreet veil between the day's clamor and the night's slow thinking. Bunter, accustomed to his master's silences, contented himself with steering as though time itself were an obedient footman. When they reached the inn-yard, Whimsy motioned him past the stable arch. "Another 5 miles, Bunter. We shall look in on Manningtree Station while memory is still green." A single paraffin lamp burned in the booking office. Behind the grill, Sergeant Hollis, seconded from Ipswich for coastal duty, was jotting in a ledger. He started at the apparition of monocle and evening coat. "Beg pardon for the hour," Whimsy said pleasantly, "but I should like a look at last night's train arrivals. The 2311 from Liverpool Street. Did it disgorge a Dr. Vernon Hyde?" Hollis turned pages. "Only 2 passengers alighted, my lord. One Miss Rosalind Chessel and a gentleman travelling under the name Mr. Charles Rayner. No Hyde, I recall, because they quarrelled over a lost hat box." "Lost hat boxes leave large footprints," Whimsy murmured. "This Miss Chessel, address?" "Carthage Theatre, Bloomsbury. Actress on tour, voice like cracked lavender bags." Whimsy thanked him, slipped a card across the desk. "Should your memory extend to the hat box, kindly jot the colour inside." Outside he mused aloud. Rayner, scarcely Hyde. And Frayne rehearses Duchess of Malfi, a touring company perhaps employing Miss Chessel. Bunter gently. "A planted alibi, my lord." "Planted and watered with telegrams. The wire to Lady Venn was filed at noon today, not sent from Dorset last night. One questions who benefited by swinging suspicion from Hyde and onto Frayne, while keeping Hyde invisible." They returned to Farleigh Crescent at 9 o'clock, finding the street cordoned by constables. Sugden emerged, cap in hand, face the colour of suet. "Frayne hanged himself, sir, in the cell at Harwich." Whimsy's sigh was almost imperceptible. "So we have silence where cross-examination might have produced music. Did he leave note or confession?" "Nothing coherent. Repeated 'not finished' to the jailer, then, well, unfinished plays and unfinished lives share a taste for anticlimax." He glanced up. Blank windows, lamplight yellowing the fog. "Bring Colonel Markham in for statement. And Dr. Hyde. Telegraphed Dorset Constabulary to confirm his whereabouts last night." Sugden nodded, stricken. When he had gone, Whimsy stood for a moment on the pavement, hearing in memory the cracked peal of the service bell. He murmured, "A bell that rings, a clock that lies, a train that never arrives. Yet our drama still lacks its second act." Next morning he requested Martins fetch the slippers. The valet produced them, pale kid leather, uppers spotless save the lilac film. Whimsy measured both soles with calipers. 1/4 inch difference, not a cobbler's error, but deliberate adjustment. "Sir Osmond limped these last weeks?" "No, my lord." "Then a shim inserts balance, perhaps to compensate for unequal flooring." He paced the drawing-room, noting floorboards. Here a gentle rise, there a dip. Near the escritoire, the floor slanted enough to cant an object subtly toward the fireplace. He crouched, set the shod slipper on the rug. It tipped, toe down. A man leaning to retrieve the paper knife would overbalance, make a perfect target. He called Treadgold. "Superintendent, humor me. Were any fingerprints on the knife?" A single blurred mark. No ridge pattern. "Could be glove smear, or wiped with cloth." He sniffed the handle. Faint bay rum, Colonel Markham's brand. "We must speak again to our retired warrior." Markham arrived stiff with outrage at the suicide. "Damnably weak thing to do. Shows guilt, if you ask me." "Or despair in innocence," Whimsy countered. He offered the colonel the snake-handled knife, hilt forward. "You examined this yesterday, left your print in bay rum essence. Did you by chance handle Sir Osmond's own earlier?" Markham bristled. "Certainly not." "Yet the handle smells of your toilet water, not Frayne's sandalwood. Curious accident." He turned away before the colonel could frame a retort. Bunter entered, carrying a brown paper parcel. Your hat box, my lord. Excellent. Whimsy unfolded the station-master's note. Rose-striped cardboard, lavender ribbon. The retrieved box matched exactly. He lifted the lid. Inside, a phrenological bust, plaster faintly crumbed at the crown, and beneath it a railway timetable from London dated 2 years before. "Colonel," Whimsy said, "recognize this bust?" Markham swallowed. "Hyde's property. Osmond borrowed it for illustration." "Borrowed or confiscated?" "This cavity," he indicated a hollow sawn in the base, "would hide documents, perhaps the negative of a compromising photograph. If Sir Osmond stole them, Hyde had motive to reclaim. Yet Hyde never arrived, because the bust travelled under the name Miss Chessel, courtesy of a booking made by someone in Farleigh Crescent after Sir Osmond's death." Treadgold stared. "But Frayne booked no parcels. He lacked time. The sender required knowledge of the bust, access to packing materials, and a desire to strip the corpse of leverage. Lady Venn oversaw no baggage. Martins stayed upstairs. Colonel, did you not own a theatre trunk from your soldiering days?" Markham's hand twitched. Whimsy pressed. "Phrenology bored you, yet you indulged Sir Osmond, perhaps because he funded your modest pension. Suppose he threatened to reveal irregularities in your Delhi court-martial. Affair of missing. Payrolls. Memoirs are dangerous." Markham's colour deepened, but he held posture. "Pure conjecture. Sufficient for Scotland Yard. Yet conjecture requires proof." Whimsy opened the bust, drew forth a single negative, a photograph of account ledgers, military stamps prominent. "Osmond kept souvenirs for leverage. He teased you yesterday, promised chapter and verse. You returned after the valet left, tampered with clock, rang bell to position him. Your fencing expertise supplied the fatal stroke. Slipped between ribs upward to heart, quick and silent." Markham balked an incredulous laugh. "And I oiled the works with lilac polish? Absurd. I smell of bay rum, yes, but lilac? Never." "Indeed," Whimsy agreed. The polish was Frayne's unknowing contribution. "You found the tin on the desk after the crime and used it to mask your fingerprints when wiping the blade and case clock palette. Lilac over bay rum produces muddled scent, just enough to misdirect. Then you planted tracing designs in Frayne's role, trusting his theatrical ego to make them plausible." The colonel's bravado cracked. He grasped for cane, missed, and sat heavily. The fool deserved some blame. Osmond had dozens of such peccadilloes, blackmailed half the county. I warned him in India. Extortion breeds reprisals. He laughed. His voice fell to a whisper. "I only meant to frighten." The knife slipped. "Such knives do when guided by fear," Whimsy said quietly. "You will make your statement to Superintendent Treadgold." Markham rose with sudden dignity. "A soldier does not skulk from duty." He marched to the door, saliva glistening on mustache like frost. When they had gone, Lady Venn appeared, drawn but composed. "Lord Peter, had my husband no innocence in his life?" "He collected lives as curios, Lady Venn. Some curios cut when mishandled." He offered the negative. "This need not reach the press." She accepted, lips trembling. "And Mr. Frayne, must his shame last? Regrettably, suicide writes its own obituary, yet I shall ensure the coroner notes that culpability lies elsewhere." He hesitated. "Grief wears many masks. Do not blame yourself for not foreseeing them all." She nodded, tears unloosed at last, and withdrew. Whimsy stared after her, then beckoned Bunter. "Fetch the Bentley. London beckons. I require St. James's air to bleach the lungs." As they drove off the Crescent, the long case clock inside number 7 struck 11, the proper hour, restored by Martins to its unvarnished honesty. Whimsy listened, eyes half closed, until the final chime died. "Time, Bunter," he said, "has resumed its steady march." "Yes, my lord." "Let us keep pace, but not, I think, with Turkish slippers. The Bentley gathered speed, leaving Farleigh Crescent to Dawn's pale arithmetic and the slow, relentless accounting that follows every resolved equation of crime. Whimsy reached Arlington Street not long after 2 in the morning, yet the club afforded its usual consolation of hot coffee and an unobtrusive fire. Charles Parker, summoned by curt telephone, arrived in rain-dark coat and the apologetic air of a man dragged from promising slumber. Whimsy waved him to the hearth, poured coffee, and produced the negative taken from the bust. "Markham's confession sits neatly on Treadgold's blotter," he began, "but it gnaws. Every syllable lines up too pat, like soldiers on parade, and men do not usually incriminate themselves with such professional polish. Observe this negative. Ledgers, yes, but the watermark on the backing paper is Victoria and Sons, 1925. Sir Osmond's dark-room stock ran to 1933, brand Truin. Therefore, he did not take this plate. Someone else did 8 years back." Parker examined the plate under a reading lamp. Could still incriminate the colonel. Could, but was it Sir Osmond who held it, or did some third hand tuck it into the bust, hoping I should find it? Consider, whoever planted the evidence knew we would inspect the phrenological head. Markham, for all his gruff cunning, lacked the nimble malice for stage management. "I smell—" "Theatre," Parker suggested dryly. "Not anymore. I smell domestic perfume under Veronal." Whimsy paced, hands clasped behind tailcoats. Lady Venn claimed 2 sleeping tablets. Halloran's brief post-mortem took blood only for type. Suppose Sir Osmond, not she, ingested heavy dose, rendering him passive when the bell rang. A drugged man would rise slowly. Somebody wanting certainty pours Veronal into his final glass, oils the clock, arranges footwear, sets bell. Markham arrives later, finds him dead or near so, and, through some blundering attempt at retrieval, believes himself author. A guilty conscience will gladly shoulder weight you offer it. Parker rubbed his temples. "You think the widow engineered the scene? She called police promptly. Shock need not be counterfeit, but motive. Money, yes, and freedom from a baronet who collected sins like stamps. More, she protected her cousin Hyde. The telegram gave him false alibi. The hatbox smuggled away documents Hyde feared. Recall the bust was addressed to Hyde's Dorset cottage, not to the cousin directly. Then why involve Frayne at all? Because drama demands understudies. Lady Venn could not predict who might tumble into suspicion. She sowed diversions in every direction. Phryne's lilac polish, Markham's bay rum, Hyde's missing train, all make a comfortable thicket. In such shrubbery, a widow might slip unseen." Parker straightened. "I can put a chemist on the decanter residue. Halloran kept the bottle. Pray do. Also discreet banking inquiries, probate value of the estate, any recent policies benefiting the lady." Parker departed with professional briskness. Whimsy returned to the Bentley where Bunter waited, polishing windshield droplets into perfect circles. "Bunter," he said, "Essex again at dawn. I wish another word with Martins, before sentiment stiffens into testimony." Grey light slid across estuary flats when they drew up at number 7. The constable on duty, red-eyed, admitted them. Upstairs, Martins folded linen as though none of the preceding horrors concerned him. Whimsy dismissed the policeman, then placed a sovereign on the dresser. "Martins, I dislike loose ends. Last night you told me Sir Osmond bade you good night at 10:30. Yet the slippers reveal a cobbler's insert. Ordered, perhaps, by you." The valet's face remained parchment, but a pulse fluttered in his throat. "Sir requested it, my lord. He said the escritoire leg sat shorter than the rest. The slope irritated him. Curious that he addressed such trifle days before death. Did Lady Venn know?" "I could not say." "Come, man. You fetched her tea each morning. You saw more than bishops see at confession. If she ordered you to bring the lilac polish downstairs yesterday, you would obey." Martins swallowed. Her ladyship remarked the slippers looked dull. She had me take both tins to the study after dinner while Sir was in the music room. Later I noted the neutral one missing. Wimsey pocketed the coin. You will repeat that to Scotland Yard when summoned. It reflects no discredit, only obedience. Leaving the valet staring after him, Wimsey descended to the drawing-room. Fog outside pressed grey noses to the panes. Inside, hush reigned save the metronome tick of the honest clock. He stood before the escritoire, picturing sequence afresh. A drugged man at desk, slippers pre-tilted, bell pull trembling, somebody watching from doorway. A woman's silhouette, perhaps, small and precise, a bottle in gloved hand. Bunter coughed discreetly. Superintendent Treadgold waits, my lord. They found Treadgold in the hall, moustache drooping. Forensics from Ipswich had telephoned. Trace veronal in Sir Osmond's blood. Double a soporific dose. Markham swears he used no drug, Treadgold muttered. He'd no access? Nor would he need it, Wimsey replied. Murder by steel suffices. But a more cautious mind, one that fears struggle, adds pharmacology. Tell me, Super, did Lady Venn prepare her husband's nightcap? Martin says she warmed the Malmsey herself in the pantry. Then we have our key. Kindly request her presence and invite Dr. Halloran as medical witness. Lady Venn entered composed, pearl earrings gleaming like parentheses around an unreadable expression. Halloran, tweed-coated and curious, followed. Wimsey indicated an armchair, but she elected to stand, hands folded at waist. Lady Venn, he began, voice quiet as turning pages. New evidence suggests veronal in Sir Osmond's wine, a common enough sedative, yet fatal when combined with deep stab wound. Did you add tablets? Her gaze held his. I did not. Then perhaps you crushed them at 8:30 before he decanted. You told us he was in good spirits, yet Martins recalls you preparing the bottle. She smiled faintly. His memory misleads. Osmond poured his own liquor. The laboratory will speak. Wimsey produced Parker's telegram, arrived scant minutes earlier. Will confirm, wine residue heavy with veronal. He saw her shoulders tense, ever so slightly. The residue came from a decanter in the pantry cupboard, not the study. Only the person who placed it there yesterday could have contaminated it. Treadgold took a step. Lady Venn, will you accompany? She lifted one hand. Before you bind me in iron, Superintendent, allow a woman a sentence. Her composure cracked not at all. If anything, her voice grew steadier. My husband's cruelty was genteel. Threats, insinuations, little bankruptcies of spirit. He ruined Frayne for amusement, tormented the Colonel for sport, bled Vernon for science. I saw them circling him like moths, helpless. So I did what women have done since Medea. I tidied matters. The men supplied distractions. I supplied decision. Halloran exhaled sotto voce. Treadgold's pencil froze. Wimsey inclined his head a fraction. And Markham's confession. Chivalry, or self-interest. I hinted the bust contained papers he feared. Guilt wrote the rest. I never imagined he would. For the first time, a tremor touched her mouth. Frayne's death lies on Sir Osmond's ghost, not mine. Wimsey's reply held neither softness nor condemnation. Ghosts seldom bear their burdens alone. He nodded to Treadgold, who produced the lightest, most ceremonial of handcuffs, bright nickel on pale wrists. She accepted confinement as though offered elbow-length gloves for an evening gala. At the threshold, she paused. Lord Peter, do you despise me? I reserve despising, he said, for tedium. Your tragedy is far from dull, but it is still murder. When the car had driven off with its lone passenger, Halloran muttered, You'll testify drug content? Naturally, Doctor, though I fear the jury will need no chemical persuasion once they meet her eyes. Wimsey turned to the mantel, reached up, and set the offending paper knife flat, the serpent finally at rest. A woman engineers order, men supply chaos. Somewhere in the middle, life bleeds. Bunter cleared his throat. Shall I settle our bill at the Bell and Dragon, my lord? Do, and tip generously. Innkeepers witness our comings and goings. He took one last survey of the room. Clock honest, rug cleaned, curtains stirred by faint breeze, and allowed himself a weary sigh. Bunter, I am suddenly, acutely hungry. Very good, my lord. The anchor at Dedham roasts a passable pheasant. They drove north along lanes rimed with silver dawn. Fields lay water-sheened, reflecting a sky the color of pewter and possibility. Whimsy, hat pulled over eyes, dozed until the car slowed by pollarded willows near the inn. He opened one eye. Do you suppose, Bunter, that justice exists in tidy parcels? Bunter considered. Justice, my lord, resembles luggage in steerage, chipped and strangely labelled, yet it arrives eventually. Arrives, yes, though seldom claimed by the right owner. Whimsy stepped down, springy once more. Still, let us eat. One cannot prosecute a universe on an empty stomach. They vanished into the inn, and beyond them the estuary mist lifted in hesitant veils, revealing slow water under a grey-gold sunrise, as though the day itself stood on tiptoe to eavesdrop upon a world where time, for the moment, ran truly. The morning sun had barely gained a foothold in the London fog, when Whimsy and Bunter arrived at the modest lodging-house in Clerkenwell, where Frayne had taken up residence after his sudden departure from Farleigh Crescent. The street was a narrow ribbon of brick and soot-streaked windows, the kind of place where even the most perfunctory passer-by would feel the weight of quiet desperation pressing in from the walls. A faint scent of damp and stale tobacco hung in the air, as if the building itself remembered the conversations held within. The landlady, a sharp-eyed woman with a voice like gravel and an apron that bore the ghosts of innumerable meals, greeted them with a cautious nod. Mr. Frayne isn't here at the moment, sir. Left early this morning, said he had an appointment across town. Might be back in the afternoon, but no promises. Whimsy inclined his head, casting a look around the cramped reception area. Thank you, madam. If you could tell me when he returns, I should be obliged. The woman gave a brief nod and returned to her duties, leaving Whimsy and Bunter to survey the premises. The staircase groaned underfoot as they ascended to the upper floors. A succession of narrow corridors lined with doors, each guarding its own fragment of anonymity. It's remarkable how little space one requires when one carries secrets, Whimsy mused, his voice low. Bunter responded only with a glance, but the expression said it all. The household had the furtive tension of a stage waiting for a new act, and the missing Frayne was its absent lead. Deciding discretion best served the investigation, Whimsy proposed a visit to Frayne's last known employer, a publishing house tucked in a quiet courtyard off Fleet Street. There, amid the scent of ink and paper, they sought to unearth clues about the man whose shadow seemed to darken Farleigh Crescent still. The editor, a brisk gentleman with a pince-nez perpetually perched on the bridge of his nose, remembered Frayne well. A man of letters, yes, though a trifle unsteady in his habits. Always promising to deliver manuscripts on time, yet often vanishing for days. He was working on something, an exposé, or so he claimed, about certain underbelly dealings in the aristocracy. Curious chap. Whimsy's eyes narrowed. Did he share the nature of these dealings? Not in detail. Said it was delicate and dangerous. I took it for idle fancy, but given recent events, well, one cannot say. The editor produced a small bundle of correspondence Frayne had left behind, letters yellowed with age, but clearly treasured. Among them, a peculiar note caught Whimsy's eye, a scrap of parchment bearing a hastily drawn map of Farleigh Crescent, with cryptic annotations, "The bell is key," "Midnight calls," "Trust none but the clocks." Interesting, Whimsy muttered. He was tracking time and sound, it seems. Back on the street, the detective pondered the significance. The bell was the servants' call bell, a central feature in the household, yet none of the servants had admitted to hearing it ring at unusual hours. If Frayn's notes were to be trusted, the bell held a clue no one had yet perceived. A visit to the local locksmith and clockmaker, a taciturn man named Humphreys, provided unexpected insight. He revealed that the call bell system at Farleigh Crescent was an antiquated contraption, prone to erratic ringing caused by faulty wiring and mechanical glitches, a fact that had apparently frustrated the staff, but was quietly tolerated as an irritant rather than a problem. "Sometimes it rings when no one touches it," Humphreys said. "Old wires crossing, you see. Could be a thing to drive a servant mad." Whimsy's lips twitched in a faint smile. A ghost in the wires. How delightfully gothic. Yet the detective's amusement was tempered by a sharper observation. If the bell rang without cause, it could provide an excellent cover for a deliberate signal. An accomplice need only mimic the errant ring to mask a clandestine message. Bunter nodded gravely. "A clever stratagem, my lord." The plot thickened. Could Frayn have been using this flaw in the call bell system to communicate secretly with an unseen party? And if so, what message was sent in those spectral rings? Whimsy decided to revisit the servants' quarters with this new hypothesis in mind. The staff, predictably, insisted they had heard nothing unusual, but a subtle shift in demeanor betrayed nervousness, particularly from the under-butler, a gaunt man named Price, whose twitching hands and darting eyes suggested knowledge he was desperate to conceal. Pressing gently but firmly, Whimsy inquired about Price's routines and habits. The under-butler eventually admitted to sometimes checking on the house, late at night when others were asleep, claiming it was to ensure no stray intruders had slipped in. His explanation was plausible, but Whimsy detected a hesitation, a furtive glance toward the locked pantry. That locked pantry, the site where the poisoned decanter had been found, had been under Price's watch. Yet he had offered no clear account of his whereabouts during the critical hours of the previous night. The discrepancy was too glaring to ignore. Confronted delicately with this, Price faltered, then recounted that he had been sent on an errand to fetch an item from a nearby chemist, but no one else corroborated this. Moreover, the timing was suspiciously convenient, coinciding exactly with the window when the veronal could have been slipped into the wine. With a carefully posed question about the pantry's lock, Whimsy elicited a telling admission. The key was often kept on a chain in the butler's office, but had been missing since the day before Osmond Venn's death. Someone else had access then, Whimsy deduced, and with a key in hand, the pantry would be no obstacle at all. The servant's downcast eyes revealed the shame of concealment, but not guilt. As they withdrew, Whimsy's thoughts turned sharply to the man who had disappeared from the scene. Frayn. If Price was not the murderer, his nervousness might be explained by knowledge of a secret pact, or worse, fear of Frayn's return. Returning to Farleigh Crescent in the fading afternoon light, Whimsy found the household simmering with barely concealed tension. Lady Venn sat by the window, knitting with steady hands, but eyes distant and unreadable. The other servants hovered, exchanging furtive glances. Whimsy approached the vicar, who was seated near the hearth, his clerical collar a stark contrast to the shadows gathering in the room. "Reverend," Whimsy began, "have you noticed any changes in the household's atmosphere since Mr. Frayn left? Any whispers, disturbances, anything out of the ordinary?" The vicar stroked his chin thoughtfully. "It's as if the house itself holds its breath, Lord Peter. People speak less openly, and the servants seem wary. Not mere grief, but a sense that something is unresolved." "Indeed," Whimsy murmured. "And unresolved matters, Reverend, often come with hidden accomplices." He glanced once more at Lady Venn, whose gaze met his with a glimmer of something unreadable, fear, perhaps, or calculation. As dusk descended, The detective knew that the threads were drawing tighter, the tangle of motives and alibis beginning to yield to the patient hand of logic. The mystery was no longer a matter of mere conjecture, but a complex puzzle whose solution lay hidden in the interplay of time, sound, and the shadows people cast upon one another. Wimsey's mind raced ahead to the next step, a careful re-examination of the timelines, the mechanical oddities, and the psychological undertow that drove a genteel household to its breaking point. For now, though, he allowed himself a brief moment of quiet satisfaction. The pieces were aligning, and the stage was set for a revelation both unexpected and inevitable. Wimsey slept no more than an hour that night, turning each fragment of the puzzle against the dim glow of an electric reading lamp in his Albany rooms. At 5, he abandoned the attempt at rest, shaved with the brisk fatalism of a man obliged to keep an appointment with chaos, and rang for Bunter. By 7, they were once more on the road to Clerkenwell, propelled by the faintly acrid optimism of railway yard fog and coffee from a stall near Smithfield. The lodging-house landlady clearly had not yet learned that Adrian Frayne lay in a Harwich mortuary. Her surprise yesterday had been genuine, her assumption that he would return, poignant. That very sincerity now struck Wimsey as an asset. Ignorance, when pure, makes an excellent litmus. He intended to dip it again. The woman, Mrs. Tigg, opened the door in carpet slippers, clutching a shawl. "Oh, it's you again, my lord. You'll be wanting Mr. Frayne. I'm afraid he never did come back." "Indeed," Wimsey said, stepping inside without waiting to be asked. "And no message?" "None, sir, though the post brought a parcel at dawn, addressed to him, care of me." She pointed to a brown paper packet tied with orange twine on the hall table. "Postmark, Harwich, 4:15 a.m. Bunter's brows rose a hairline fraction. "Mrs. Tigg," Wimsey said, voice as casual as if commenting on the weather. "Mr. Frayne met with an accident on the coast. May I take charge of his belongings for the executors? You will naturally receive a proper receipt." The landlady's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, the poor gentleman. Of course, my lord." She turned away, dabbing her eyes. Wimsey slipped the parcel beneath his arm. They climbed to the garret room Frayne had occupied. It was small, but the disorder inside spoke of a mind perpetually rehearsing new acts. Costume sketches pinned to the sloping plaster, fragments of typed dialogue curling like autumn leaves under a draught, a portable Remington balanced precariously on an upended trunk. On the bed lay an evening coat that still bore a faint stain of lilac. Bunter produced gloves. Wimsey began opening drawers. A sheaf of letters, to Sir Osmond, to Colonel Markham, to an unnamed benefactor, all couched in a tone of insinuation. Blackmail, as Hyde claimed. But one envelope, heavier, contained a single object, a brass key stamped FCPT Rye. "Farleigh Crescent Pantry," Wimsey murmured. So Frayne possessed a duplicate. Either he connived with someone who had access to the original blank, or... He studied the Remington. Dust lay undisturbed across most of the keys, except the T, H, and E, which gleamed faintly. He touched the space bar. Immaculate. Bunter, our late scene designer, typed very little, but returned again and again to "the," titles, threats. He rolled a sheet onto the platen and depressed the letters. "The." All 3 struck cleanly, leaving fine powdered graphite on the paper. He angled the lamp. The keytops had been painted over with graphite dust, a favorite trick to raise latent prints. Someone had searched yesterday after they left, hoping to see whether Frayne had typed a particular line, perhaps the epigram found in Sir Osmond's escritoire. Wimsey dusted the 3 letters onto a glass slide Bunter presented, then sealed it in an envelope. We shall see whose prints appear, if Scotland Yard can coax them out. The brown paper parcel he unwrapped last. Inside lay a leather portfolio, water-stained and smelling of coal-fire smoke. On its flap, a neat label, VH 1905. Vernon Hyde's initials. Within, page after fragile page of military cipher from Hyde's Delhi intelligence days. Some bore red pencil ticks beside words like disbursement and mirror patrol. A single sheet, fresher, carried Frayn's looping script. Insurance renewed. Price rises with each delay. Bell rings tonight, the final act. Whimsy exhaled. So Frayn intended to double his leverage. He betrayed Hyde while taunting Osmond. But who mailed the dossier here after Frayn's death? He retied the parcel, slid it under his arm, and left Mrs. Tigg to her sorrow. At 8:30 he strode into Scotland Yard, deposited the documents with Parker, and outlined his suspicions. Parker, neat as a parlour clock, listened, then directed a squad to pick up Vernon Hyde for formal questioning. Hyde arrived by 11, pallid yet strangely composed. He did not deny the portfolio was his. He admitted writing ciphers long ago, losing the file in a Delhi burglary. Losing or selling. Whimsy let the question hang, then produced Frayn's note. Hyde read it, jaw tightening. So he planned to trap me as well, he muttered. I was a fool. Not entirely, Whimsy said softly. You saw an opportunity when Frayn died. Post the incriminating file to his room, shift suspicion of its theft back onto him. But you overlooked the postmark hour and the fact that an inmate cannot mail parcels. Hyde raised his head. I mailed nothing. Someone's framing me. A phrase too many now, Whimsy replied, pinching the bridge of his nose. Markham claims Frayn threatened him. Frayn threatens Hyde. Hyde warns Lady Venn, but Frayn dies before he can publish anything. Who then ensures the secrets die with him? Bunter coughed discreetly. If I may, my lord, there is still Price. True, Whimsy conceded. Turning to Parker, bring Price up from Essex, and fetch Martins. He, too, handled pantry keys. While waiting, Whimsy had Hyde's clothing tested for lilac polish residue. None. But his overcoat pocket yielded a railway receipt. Harwich to London, 2:10 a.m., the morning after Frayn's suicide. Hyde had indeed been in Harwich, close enough to acquire Frayn's possessions. Price arrived shortly after 3. Under interrogation, his facade cracked. He confessed that Frayn paid him to leave pantry doors ajar during late rehearsals of the Bell, so that Frayn could creep in and photograph documents Sir Osmond stored carelessly. But Price insisted he had no part in poisoning or murder. Mr. Frayn said the bell ringing would be a signal that Sir Osmond had capitulated. Price sobbed, hands shaking. I never thought he'd be killed. Whimsy studied him. You are frightened, he said, not unkindly. Because the signal came, and a man died, but who else knew you were leaving doors ajar? Price faltered. I suppose, Mr. Hyde. He came once, late. Said he was verifying household security on Lady Venn's behalf. A silence settled. Parker's gaze snapped to Hyde, who stared back, eyes suddenly bleak. I went to ensure Frayn hadn't betrayed her, Hyde murmured. When I realized he meant to fleece everyone, I confronted him in the study. Osmond was already drowsy from wine. Frayn claimed victory. I lost my head. You struck? Whimsy asked. No, I threatened. He laughed, a cruel sound, and said he'd make public the Delhi papers next day. I left. I swear Osmond was alive then. And the knife? Frayn had it, waved it like a prop. Parker cleared his throat. Yet Sir Osmond was stabbed hours later. Frayn again, Hyde insisted. Who else would mock him with his own toys? Whimsy tapped fingers against the table, then turned to Martins, who had been silent till now. The valet's face told a reluctant story. I saw Dr. Hyde leaving that night, sir, near midnight. He dropped a small object. Looked like a vial. I picked it up later, threw it away. Veronal vial? Possibly. Hyde's hand trembled at the mention. But still, the planted evidence, the meticulous use of timepieces, These felt like Frayn's artistry, not Hyde's soldierly brutality. And Phryne was dead before the parcel travelled. Wimsey's mind returned to Lady Ven's composure, her ability to weave others' motives into a tapestry shielding her own. He requested a private conference with Parker. Suppose, he proposed, that Lady Ven, upon seeing Hyde confront Osmond, realized her Veronal alone would not suffice. She fetched Phryne, bribed him with promise of the Delhi file. Phryne, in theatrical zeal, elaborated the bell and clock scheme. She watched as he stabbed Osmond, perhaps believing the stab would be shallow. Staged, but it killed. Panic followed. She turned her plan upon Phryne, drugging his wine in the drawing room while he adjusted the scene, then summoned police. Later, in his cell, a message or bribe ensured his suicide. Hyde, seeking to shield her, gathered Phryne's spoils, posted them to mislead us, unaware she would ultimately sacrifice him if necessary. Parker rubbed his temples. A web, not a line. Can we prove it? Maybe, Wimsey said grimly. Phryne's prints on the knife cross with graphite traces on his Remington. Meanwhile, the Veronal vial Martins discarded may yet lie in the garden, and Lady Ven's knitting needles. The steel tips carry minute traces of polish, according to Bunter's earlier observation. She used one to smear oil on the clock, a task requiring slender reach. A search of Farleigh Crescent gardens produced, beneath lilac bushes, a tiny cut-glass vial bearing Lady Ven's monogram. In its throat clung a residue matching the poisoned decanter. The knitting needle, seized from her sewing bag at Holloway, held oil identical to that on the clock's escapement. Presented with these, Lady Ven's calm crumbled at last. She wept, silently, ferociously, confessing that, yes, she orchestrated the final act after Phryne's impromptu violence, ensuring every player except herself would appear guilty. In the grey chill of early dawn, Wimsey and Bunter walked along the embankment, the river thick as molten lead below. She thought she could write the ending, Wimsey said. But true endings write themselves and seldom flatter the author. Bunter, after a moment. Is justice satisfied, my lord? Rarely, Wimsey murmured. It accepts a down payment and calls the rest enlightenment. We have given it what we can today. Tomorrow, it will send a new bill. He dropped his cigarette tip into the Thames, watched the glow vanish, and turned toward the faint promise of sunrise that lay beyond St. Paul's, as though even the city, soaked in fog and deceit, must eventually consent to a little light. Bunter's question lingered in the damp air long after they left the river, threading itself through Wimsey's idle musings as the Bentley nosed over Westminster Bridge and turned west toward the still-sleeping squares. By the time they reached Arlington Street, the sky had lifted to a pale, uncertain pearl, and the city's chimneys exhaled their first tentative plumes. Wimsey found himself unwilling to climb the steps to his rooms. Thought still tugged him forward, down Duke Street, round the corner to St. James's Square, where the railings were wet and black and the winter grass lay flat beneath last night's drizzle. He walked the perimeter twice before speaking. We have the confession, the vial, the needle. Enough for a jury, yet something continues to scrape like a loose slate in high wind. He glanced sideways at his companion. Bunter, do you remember the graphite on the Remington keys? Perfectly, my lord. And the fact that only "the" had been dusted? I assumed the seeker wished to see whether Phryne had typed the epigram about altering clocks. But that line contains a dozen other letters. Why those three? An abbreviation, perhaps, Bunter suggested. Or a signature. Or, Wimsey's pace slowed. An instruction. THE. If one dusts 3 keys, hoping for prints, one must know which keys the victim pressed last. Suppose Phryne, in extremis, attempted to leave a message. 3 letters only, struck in haste. THE. Monumental in their ambiguity. Whoever searched the machine feared that partial message enough to risk detection. Bunter digested this. We assumed Lady Venn performed that search, my lord. Yet, graphite dust is not her métier. Precisely. Nor would she risk returning to Clerkenwell after arranging Frane's death. No, the dusting belongs to someone still at liberty, still nervous. He stopped beside the equestrian statue, rain glimmering on the bronze tricorn, and sighed. Markham rots in remand, Hyde in custody. Lady Venn confronted her own conscience. Who is left? Bunter answered softly. Price, my lord, the under-butler. Whimsy resumed his march, accelerating now. A man paid to look invisible, invaluable when doors must remain ajar and bells ring on cue. Frane bribed him, Lady Venn bullied him, Hyde relied on him, but after Frane's death, the fellow discovered he held the one piece that proved fatal coordination. They may have meant them, the conspirators collectively, or they, pointing to more than one culprit. Price understood enough to fear exposure, so he hunted for proof Frane had left behind. Lest it incriminate him, he found none. Our arrival yesterday roused fresh panic. Bunter kept step. He remains at Farleigh Crescent, supervising the packing. Superintendent Treadgold left him free, considering him insignificant. Insignificance is the finest cloak crime affords, Whimsy said. Come, the Bentley knows the way. Fog had rolled inland again by the time they reached Mistley. Grey vapor clung to ironwork and hedgerow, muffling the world to footfalls and heartbeat. Number 7 stood in orderly desolation, furniture shrouded, paintings lifted from walls, carpets rolled like scrolls awaiting silent librarians. Only the long case clock persisted, ticking bravely in a corner amid canvas-swathed chairs. Price appeared in the doorway of the morning room, his thin shoulders hunched within a servant's black coat. "My lord," he said, voice dusty. "I didn't expect—" "Few people do," Whimsy replied, removing gloves. "Superintendent Treadgold asked me to retrieve a small item." He wandered to the escritoire, opened and shut drawers at random, giving Price time to fret. The man's eyes flicked toward the staircase, then back. "Dull work, clearing a house," Whimsy observed. "One learns its every groan and creak. Imagine during that process, discovering one holds the single thread unraveling 3 people's nooses. It would keep a man awake." Price's mouth worked soundlessly. "You wiped Frane's typewriter, Price. Left your prints upon the graphite. You posted the Delhi files, hoping suspicion would fall upon Hyde. Last night you traveled to London, searched his club lodgings for more evidence, and, not finding it, returned here before daylight. A tiring schedule. The servants' reserve collapsed like wet paper. They used me, my lord, every one of them, promised money, protection, threatened dismissal. I never meant harm. Yet harm came. When you realized Frane might have named you, you panicked." Whimsy's tone was gentle, inexorable. "You have 2 courses. Continue panicking until rope or guilt closes round your throat, or speak while truth remains a negotiator rather than a judge." Price sagged against the paneled wall. "I can't bear jail." "Then unburden yourself. Treadgold will weigh cooperation." Whimsy signaled Bunter, who stepped into the hall and summoned the constable posted outside. Price's confession unfolded in tremulous fragments. Lady Venn had first approached him. "Drug Sir Osmond's decanter and keep watch for Fremmy's signal." The bell. But Frane, greedy, had separately enlisted Price to steal the pantry key and feed him documents. On the fatal night, Price slipped tablets into the wine at 8. Later, he heard the bell, descended, saw Frane and Lady Venn together at the study door. Minutes passed. A muffled cry, a thud. Frane emerged, pale, thrust paper knife at Price, ordering him to wipe the handle and return it beside the corpse. Terrified, Price obeyed. When police scrutiny threatened, he attempted damage control, dusted typewriter, posted files, even oiled the clock anew to support Lady Venn's story, but overlooked the knitting needle. I only wanted to vanish, he finished, voice hoarse. Take my savings and sail, but every path was blocked by their shadows. Treadgold, fetched by telephone, listened grimly. Accessory before and after. He'll hang if the jury's in mood. It may be commuted, Whimsy suggested quietly. Juries despise masterminds. They pity men in livery. Treadgold, who had none of Whimsy's romantic tolerance, merely grunted and led Price away. The house felt lighter once the under-butler's footsteps faded. Whimsy remained by the clock, fingers resting atop its walnut case. The dial showed 11:47, accurate now to the second. He reflected that all its falsities, all its oily indiscretions, had been human impositions. Left alone, the mechanism pursued honesty with dogged simplicity. Clocks, unlike people, yearned for exactitude. Bunter re-entered, hat in hand. "Shall I secure lodgings in Harwich for the inquest, my lord?" "Inquest? Yes." Whimsy touched the serpent-hilted dagger lying on the dust-sheeted table, then set it down with repugnance. "But I feel no appetite for further witness boxes. Parker will handle formalities. We, Bunter, have earned retreat." The valet permitted himself a fractional smile. "A place with no clocks, perhaps?" "On the contrary," Whimsy said, moving toward the door. "A place where clocks may be seen but not heard. One of those Swiss valleys where they tick away behind carved doors and little Edelweiss girls pop out on the hour. At such distance, time becomes decorative rather than dictatorial." They stepped into weak sunshine. Police cars idled at the Crescent's curve. Neighbors peered from drawn curtains, curiosity mingling with relief. Whimsy paused beside the Bentley, casting a last glance at the house. Its windows empty, secrets spent. "Farleigh Crescent will forget," he said softly. "The estate agent will varnish floors, polish brass, extol proximity to the estuary air. Someone will laugh in that drawing room, believing the echo their own." Bunter opened the door. "And the bell, my lord?" Dismantled, melted, recast as something innocuous, perhaps a ship's handbell calling children in for cocoa. He seated himself, shut the door with finality. "Drive, Bunter." As the car gathered speed, Whimsy leaned back, allowing fatigue to settle at last upon his shoulders. Yet rest eluded him. His mind, that indefatigable librarian, shuffled the file labeled Farleigh Crescent to its correct shelf, then busied itself with a new label, Unanswered Residual. Whatever judicial verdicts awaited, Markham's reduced sentence, Hyde's court-martial whispers, Lady Venn's probable life term, one haunting question remained. What small mercy, what human decency, might have intervened 3 weeks earlier and prevented a bell's cry in the silent hours? But the question, like the road unwinding beneath the Bentley's tires, carried no answer, only the weary insistence that men and women, clever enough to time trains to the minute and toxic powders to the grain, still failed to synchronize their hearts to simple kindness. London receded behind them, the estuary spread in silver shards below, and the winter sun climbed an inch higher, confirming that despite wreckage and repentance, the planet persisted in its faithful revolutions. Whimsy closed his eyes, surrendered finally to sleep, and dreamed, not of clocks or daggers or lilac polish, but of a faint chime floating across alpine meadows, precise, unambiguous, and utterly harmless. Whimsy slept the length of a single county and woke, stiff-necked, as the Bentley rolled through the western suburbs. Bunter, having judged precisely when his master's eyelids would flutter, slowed on the approach to Hammersmith Bridge and produced a thermos. The coffee scalded and revived. "Parker rang White's, my lord," he reported. "Urgent. Yard has something from fingerprint section." "Then to Scotland Yard first," Whimsy said, kneading a knot from his shoulder. "I trust they have not discovered I did it myself." Parker awaited them in the cluttered office overlooking the Thames. He looked pleased in the way only a policeman with an unexpected laboratory result can. Prints lifted from the Remington keys, he began without preamble. Aren't Price's, aren't Frayn's. They belong to one Rosalind Chessel, actress, minor record for pilfering costume jewelry in 1931. We had her prints from that. Whimsy whistled. Miss Hatbox herself. She quarreled at Manningtree the night Osmond died, allegedly over lost luggage. Where is she now? Touring company performing Hedda Gabler at the Lyceum, Sheffield. They moved to Nottingham on Friday. And we assume the Hatbox was merely Hyde's convenience. Whimsy's eyes glittered. Upon reflection, no. Miss Chessel is the missing spoke that keeps turning the wheel. She dusted the machine, she carried the bust, perhaps more. We must interview her before she exits stage left. Parker frowned. Chessel can scarcely have been present at the stabbing. Actors excel at entrances unnoticed. Whimsy cut in. Remember, Frayn was a designer. He needed a confederate able to slip in as maid or dressmaker. A woman, moreover, whose hands fit the lilac tin and the knitting needle's oil trick. Lady Venn could delegate, Miss Chessel could execute. He turned to Bunter. Pack for the north. We catch the 12:15 to Sheffield. A little after 4 o'clock that same afternoon, they were seated in the grim warmth of a second-class compartment, rocketing past frost-whitened hedges. Whimsy pored over company playbills Parker had procured. Rosalind Chessel, second lead, accomplished soubrette and needlewoman. Needlewoman, he murmured. There's our steel knitting pin. In Sheffield, the soot-dim afternoon already flirted with night. The theatre crowded St. George's Square with vans and posters. Backstage smelled of sighs, paint, and anxiety. Whimsy sent a polite note requesting 5 minutes. Miss Chessel answered, perhaps flattered by crested notepaper, perhaps curious. She came to the stage door parlor wearing rehearsal blacks, her angular face powdered, hair pinned beneath a scarf. I know who you are, she said before he could speak. Inspector Sugden's friend, the lord with the monocle. If it's about Sir Osmond, I won't be dragged back to that ghastly circus. I've earned my week's salary. Whimsy inclined his head. Merely conversation, Miss Chessel. Tea rather than truncheon. He produced the fingerprint card like a conjurer revealing a dove. This, alas, makes conversation inevitable. Why did you search Frayn's machine? She eyed the card, swallowed. I wanted to know whether he'd betrayed me. Adrian wasn't trustworthy. He promised the documents would ruin the baronet and free us both. Instead, he tried selling them twice. First to Hyde, then to Lady Venn. And when the plan soured? I went to Manningtree because Adrian wired, bring Hatbox. He'd hidden the bust at my digs earlier, too bulky to carry by train. Said it was the head of Medusa. One look and Osmond turns to stone. She laughed thinly. I thought he was being dramatic as usual. Yet you quarreled with station staff? A ploy. Adrian warned the police might follow Hyde. The row distracted them while I slipped out the parcel's door with the bust. Price met me in the goods yard, took it to the house. Price now faces indictment, Whimsy said gently. Truth may temper his fate. Continue. I waited at the Gable Inn till dawn. Adrian stumbled in, white as chalk, mumbling that the wrong cue sounded. He thrust money at me, dirty notes stinking of lilac, told me to vanish. Her gaze hardened. I read the next day Sir Osmond was murdered. I guessed the rest. When Adrian was arrested, I panicked. I went through his room trying to burn anything with my name. The keys were graphite dusted already. I thought letters might show. They didn't. You posted the cipher file under Hyde's initials? Yes. Thought it would shift blame. I'm not proud. She met his eyes suddenly. But I never stabbed anyone. The others used me as courier, nothing more. Nothing? Whimsy's voice was silk over steel. You brought a knitting kit to Farleigh Crescent weeks earlier, assisted Frayn in touching up curtains and carpets for his scene. One needle, sharpened, proved ideal for oiling a clock. Another, longer, could push Veronal through wax seal into a decanter without unstoppering it. A quiet woman with deft hands and no stake but a promised share. Colour left her cheeks. I did what Adrian asked. It was a prank at first. We'd scare Osmond into paying. But pranks with Veronal and Steele seldom stay comic. Wimsey leaned back, voice suddenly kind. Miss Chessel, Lady Ven will stand trial for murder, Price for conspiracy, Hyde for perverting justice. Your testimony could clarify hierarchy and perhaps spare you the worst. Her shoulders slumped. What must I do? Return to London tonight with Inspector Parker. State precisely who gave which orders and when. Omit nothing inconvenient. He rose. Truth, like a stage cue, is best delivered promptly. Parker, who had entered silently, escorted her away, both dwarfed by scenery flats depicting a Norwegian drawing room, a polite hell for Hedda. Wimsey watched them go, then wandered onto the darkened stage. Footlights, unlit, stared blindly across to wings where shapes of cardboard furniture awaited animation. He imagined Frayne here, sketching illusions, imagined Chessel sewing upholstery, rehearsing stealth. From the flies, a cold draught descended, smelling of dust and rosine, backstage honesty after front-of-house perfume. Bunter joined him. All arranged, my lord. Miss Chessel departs on the 6:05. Good. Wimsey pivoted, listening to the hush. Strange, Bunter. The entire plot hinged on that servant's bell. A jerry-rigged wire and a faulty spring, more fatal than dynamite. Quality of materials, my lord, Bunter observed. One trusts substance, not varnish. They left the theatre. Snow had begun to fall, small, deliberate flakes that softened the clatter of trams. Wimsey buttoned his overcoat. Substance, yes. Tonight we dine at the Cutler's Hall, sample real Sheffield steel. After so much brittle deceit, I crave an honest edge. Back at their hotel after dinner, a telegram awaited. Price hanged himself in cell. Left note, too many bells. Parker. Wimsey read it twice, lips compressed. Another life spilt in the gears. If only he'd clung a few hours longer, Chessel would have borne the heavier burden. Bunter poured brandy. Weak timber splinters underweight, my lord. Wimsey accepted the glass, but set it untasted on the desk. He wrote 2 letters. One to the Home Office advocating leniency for Hyde, deluded, not wicked. The second to Treadgold, requesting removal of the surviving servants to gentler posts. Sealing wax cooled. Fatigue tugged again, but thought still nipped at the heels of conscience. What remains unresolved? Bunter asked. The simplest matter. Wimsey stared out at snowflakes spinning through lamplight. Frayne's blurred marginal note, like a strangled linnet. He inscribed that while planning the bell's sound effect. Yet the bell, when I heard it, had a tone nearer a J, harsh, metallic. Linnet implies higher pitch, delicate. Either Frayne's ear was romantic or the bell sounded different earlier. He turned, eyes narrowed. If someone replaced a bronze clapper with steel to sharpen the note, and used bronze elsewhere. Tomorrow, Bunter, we revisit the evidence store. I wish to weigh the serpent-hilted knife. Bunter lifted brows. A substitution, my lord. Perhaps. Bronze wears lilac polish poorly. Steel takes it better. If Frayne supplied a stage prop made of softer metal and someone substituted a sharper real blade of steel, the murder grew from play acting into tragedy. Outside, snow thickened, turning pavements white, erasing prints almost as they formed. Wimsey watched the silent conversion, thinking how swiftly the world covers its own scars, then took up the brandy at last. A toast, Bunter, to truth. Not the comfortable lady we expected, but a frail girl drenched and shivering outside the stage door, waiting for her cue. We must see she reaches the footlights before the curtain falls. Bunter raised his glass. To truth, my lord. and somewhere in the muffled distance of the wintering city, a bell, not a servant's but a church clock, struck a clear, crystalline 8, each note falling into the snow with the inevitability of consequence and the faint, bright hope of reprieve. The following morning dawned grey and merciless, the city's usual clamour muted beneath a steady, fine drizzle. Whimsy, with the certainty of one who has passed the threshold into final reckoning, rose early, his thoughts already tracing the labyrinthine path that had led them here. The puzzle's pieces, scattered and jagged, were beginning to interlock with that exquisite precision of a clock's mechanism, each turn revealing the delicate cogs beneath. Bunter found him at his window, a steaming cup of tea in hand, watching the sodden streets below. "The snow has gone, my lord. Dampness returns like an old adversary." "A fitting metaphor," Whimsy murmured, eyes distant. "For truth, too, is often drenched in layers that obscure until they dissolve." He turned, his expression both resolute and faintly amused. "Let us be about our task. We must revisit the police evidence store this morning, inspect that serpent-hilted blade, and, most crucially, re-examine the clockwork of Farleigh Crescent itself." They arrived at the yard as the city awoke, draped in the relentless drizzle that blurred the edges of building and sky. The evidence room was a vault of contradictions, relics of violence neatly arranged, a theatre of shadows and whispered possibilities. Parker awaited, already deep in conversation with Inspector Sugden. "Good morning, Lord Peter," Sugden greeted, a hint of newfound respect in his tone. "We have preserved the knife as you requested." He gestured toward a glass case where the serpent-hilted weapon lay in repose, remarkably sharp for a stage prop. Whimsy's gloved fingers never touched the blade as he examined it through the glass. The hilt was a delicate bronze, artfully coiled serpent whose eyes might once have held garnets, now replaced by dull imitation stones. The blade, however, gleamed steel-cold enough to silence even the most garrulous alibi. A curious pairing, Whimsy mused. One expects uniformity in theatrical weapons, especially when deception is the script. This disparity demands explanation. He looked at Parker. "May I see the evidence register?" Parker produced the ledger, fingered to the entry marked "Stage Props, Manningtree House." Only one such knife was catalogued. Then the blade was substituted after the initial inspection, Whimsy concluded. "And before the murder." His eyes flicked to Sugden. "Were the props stored securely during the days preceding the incident?" Sugden hesitated. The housekeeper claimed to lock them in the upper cabinet, but several keys were unaccounted for. "Uh-huh," Whimsy said softly. "That opens a corridor through which a second player could enter unseen." "Yet all present swore they touched nothing," Parker interjected. "Swore," Whimsy echoed with a dry smile, "is the polite word for the theatrical dance of omission." He turned to Bunter. "The timing is critical. If someone replaced the knife, it must have been before the fateful evening and before the machine with the bell came into play. I want to see that cabinet and assess its lock." Minutes later, they were back at Farleigh Crescent, the house cold and somber under the persistent rain. The front door's lock turned with reluctant protest, the polished brass dulled by neglect. Inside, the air held the faintest trace of lilac and damp wool, memories distilled into scent. The servants' quarters revealed a modest cabinet bolted into a corner, a modest edifice of oak and secrecy. Whimsy examined the lock, noting the keyhole's neat oval and the faint scratches around its edge. "Amateur work," he murmured. "Either the lock was forced or a duplicate key passed freely." Martha, the housekeeper, stood nearby, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and indignation. "I would never let anyone near the keys, sir. The housekeeper's honor is precisely what one must scrutinize," Whimsy interrupted gently. "Might I ask, was anyone else known to have access?" She hesitated. "Mr. Price kept a key for emergencies, but it was returned to me last week." "And Miss Hatbox, Miss Chessel?" Whimsy's tone was clipped. "I cannot say, my lord. I saw her only in passing. See here." Bunter produced a small bundle of keys from his pocket, each tagged and numbered. Duplicate sets are sometimes quietly made. Whimsy nodded thoughtfully. "We require the locksmith's report on the cabinet and all keys issued to Farleigh Crescent." Outside, the rain thickened, pooling on the gravel and dulling footsteps. The investigation's net tightened, but still the vital truth eluded grasp. Back in the drawing room, Whimsy's eye caught the clock once more. Its face was chipped, the hour hand stuck perilously close to 8. He lifted the panel at its rear and examined the mechanism. A subtle misalignment caught his attention. One tiny cog rotated differently than the rest. "See this, Bunter?" he whispered. "A single errant cog spoils the whole orchestra." He replaced the panel and sat heavily in an armchair. The clock had been manipulated not just to chime falsely, but to disguise the precise moment of death. "Timing, as always, is the murderer's cruel mistress," Whimsy said, lighting a cigar with a practiced flick. Bunter poured another whiskey. "And the scent of lilac? Does it point again to our elusive hostess?" Whimsy puffed deliberately. "Lilac is a delicate mask, worn to hide sharp edges. It is no mere perfume, but a signature." He rose and paced to the window, watching rain trickle down the pane. "We have the assassin's tools, the motives laid bare, and witnesses more tangled than a stage farce. Yet one question remains: who benefited most from the time lost to false alarms and misheard bells?" The door opened suddenly. Parker entered, holding a telegram. "This just arrived, my lord, from the Home Office. Miss Chessel has confessed to concealing evidence, specifically a second set of keys and a vial containing a trace of veronal. She claims she was coerced to plant it." Whimsy's smile was a blade's edge. "Ah, the plot thickens with each new act. The game, it seems, is not finished. Our Rosalind is no mere courier, but a player moved by unseen hands." He folded the telegram and pocketed it. "Bunter, prepare to return to London. We shall confront Miss Chessel anew and unravel the final threads. The curtain will soon rise on the denouement." As they left Farleigh Crescent, the rain finally ceased. A faint light pierced the heavy clouds, promising revelation after the long night of secrets. Whimsy's mind danced through the possibilities, every step measured and precise, like the ticking of the very clock that had become their cryptic witness. The truth was close. Closer than any of them suspected, and when it emerged, it would not only reveal the murderer, but expose the fragile human frailty hiding beneath the polished surface of Farleigh Crescent's genteel facade. The room was charged with a peculiar stillness when Whimsy returned to Farleigh Crescent that evening, the fading light casting long, accusing shadows across the once grand drawing room. The assembled company, Inspector Sugden, Parker, Bunter, Miss Chessel, and the household's remaining denizens, waited with a mixture of curiosity and dread, each sensing that the moment of unveiling was at hand. Whimsy took his place near the fireplace, his posture relaxed, yet every eye fixed upon him with rapt attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice measured and arch, "we stand upon the brink of truth, that elusive quarry which has thus far danced just beyond our reach, cloaked in falsehood and layered deceit." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "Miss Chessel, your recent confession of concealing keys and a vial of veronal was a performance, artfully delivered yet, alas, incomplete." He fixed her with a gaze both penetrating and oddly gentle. "You were indeed complicit in misdirection, but not the architect of this tragedy." Turning to Sugden, Whimsy continued, "Consider the matter of the clock, the manipulated cog that set the stage for confusion. Who had access to the cabinet keys? Who could orchestrate such precision?" The inspector shifted uncomfortably. Whimsy smiled thinly. "Mr. Price, your return of keys last week was, in truth, a fortnight ago. The delay coincides with the preparation of the crime, a crime not of passion, but of calculated desperation. The assembled gasped softly. Price's facade cracked, his jaw tightened. "It was you who replaced the stage prop's blade with the real serpent-hilted dagger," Whimsy asserted, a gesture designed to implicate the theatrical troupe, to cloak your actions in smoke and mirrors. Your motive? Financial ruin, masked by a veneer of camaraderie. Sugden stepped forward, handcuffs at the ready. Price's eyes darted, then fell. "But there is more," Whimsy added, pacing slowly. "The faint scent of lilac, the false timeline, the missing salver, all elements woven with the precision of a master dramatist. Miss Hatbox, Miss Rosalind, your silence was bought with promises and threats, yet your involvement was unwitting, a pawn moved by Price's hand." Rosalind bowed her head, tears shimmering. "And the final act, the vial of veronal, planted to suggest poisoning, when in truth the cause was far more mundane. A blow delivered by the ornate handle of the dagger itself, swift and cruel, hidden beneath the cloak of night and misdirection." Whimsy turned to the room at large. "It is a grim reminder that human frailty, greed, fear, envy, often dresses itself in the most elegant of garments, playing out in the polished halls of Farleigh Crescent." He drew a breath, eyes twinkling beneath the weight of tragedy. "And so, justice shall take its course. Let this be a lesson that no deception, however artful, can withstand the relentless scrutiny of truth." With a final wry glance at Bunter, who had been quietly taking notes, Whimsy lit a fresh cigar. "I trust, my friends, that the curtain has fallen on this most perplexing drama, and as Shakespeare himself might have said, truth will out, no matter how cleverly it is concealed." As the police led Price away, and the house seemed to exhale after the tension of long days, Whimsy stood by the window once more, the city lights beginning to twinkle through the clearing sky. The game was done, the pieces aligned, and the human heart, flawed, fragile, yet endlessly fascinating, laid bare. "Bunter," Whimsy said softly, "one wonders what new mysteries await beyond the mist of Farleigh Crescent. For now, though, I shall content myself with the comforting tick of a properly set clock." And with that, Lord Peter Whimsy, ever the urbane detective with a penchant for elegant irony, took his leave, his keen mind already wandering toward the next puzzle, the next challenge, the next subtle dance of shadow and light.